Yeah, I think it's important to, understand like what is money, right? Like what is it?
I
right?
agree.
So money in itself then is like a language.
That is money. That's how money emerges in the marketplace. It is not a government creation. It has nothing to do with government other than the fact that they monopolize it and try to control it to control people.
Asking that question of what is money and understanding, what's the role of the central banks and the Fed and all these things, you start to realize you're like, wait a sec, this makes way more sense than what we've been told. And why aren't we told this stuff in school?
My poor little daughter is crying up there right now because she's paying the debt that the government is amassing with all of this spending. But they literally, Robert, it's amazing. They literally don't even consider where money comes from. They act as though it is just theirs.
So they always had like money men around. So I was trying to show how like there's always a money man around. Okay, like in a kingdom, when it was a monarchy, the money man was running the show.
It's the pathway that man becomes corrupt, is certainly money.
After you read history and if you see what's happening, you will start thinking like, why do I hold fiat money?
Right.
Its control authority is fair and preserved through the brutality, the brutal meritocracy that is nature and power projection.
99.99% of humans have no idea what money is, in my estimation. If Ray Dalio doesn't know what money is, I'm going to say that disqualifies like 99.99% of everyone else. Hey everybody, welcome to the What is Money Show. I am thrilled to have you here joining me on my mission to help shine light on the corruption of money. Now, if this is your first time listening to the What is Money Show, I strongly recommend that you go back to episodes 1 through 9 first, which lays a lot of the groundwork for many of the concepts that we explore on the show. These first 9 episodes are my series with Michael Saylor, and thousands of people have told me that this is the best podcast series they've ever heard, hands down, and that it was instrumental to their understanding of money and Bitcoin. So if you're looking to start a deep dive into the nature of money, I don't think there's any place better that you can start other than episode 1 of this show. Now, a little bit about this show and how it makes money. The What is Money Show is 100% sponsor based. So all of our revenues are derived from direct sponsorships. And I strive to be very selective about the sponsors that I work with, specifically only using sponsors that I use personally, and also choosing sponsors that have values which are well aligned to the values expressed on this show, such as freedom, education, self-sovereignty, etc. So what I'm going to do now is a few ad reads right at the top of the show, and then I'll do a few more ad reads in the middle. And I hope you'll take the time to listen to them, as again, these are hand-selected sponsors, and I think you'll like what they have to offer.
Today's podcast is brought to you by In Wolf's Clothing. Wolf is the world's first startup accelerator program focused exclusively on the Bitcoin Lightning Network. 4 times per year, Wolf brings teams from around the world to New York City to work with like-minded entrepreneurs, pushing the boundaries of what is possible with Bitcoin and Lightning. The program is designed to help early-stage companies achieve product-market fit, develop their brand, secure early-stage funding, and grow businesses that help fuel the global adoption of Bitcoin. So go to wolfnyc.com today to apply for the program or learn more. Again, that is wolfnyc.com.
Asking that question of what is money and understanding economics better and the political game and how we got here and, what's the role of the central banks and the Fed and, what is fiat and so all these things you start to realize you're like, wait a sec, this makes way more sense than what we've been told. And why aren't we told this stuff in school? And why aren't we told, why aren't we really on a deeper level, talking about financial responsibility in school? Like we're learning about all this other stuff, but like, we're not learning about really how to save money and how to do this and how to do that. It's just like, get a job and spend and get a job and spend. And it's, you realize the other thing that was major, and I understood this in other ways, but just the things that we think we know, we don't know. And there's very few experts out there, Robert. Like even, when I'm in my field and I see a journalist write about something, or I hear another expert in the field talk about something, like that's not how it is. That's not how jiu-jitsu works, or how fighting works. So that's not the thing, man. Like, go deeper. And I think it gets you to realize there's very few experts. What we're told is not the truth. And it's on us to go out there and search for it and make an honest effort at doing so. I think it's going to bring a much more truthful world, a much more beautiful world, and one that kind of puts everyone at ease. And I think a lot of people for many, many years, probably over the last 100 years, have been working their asses off and not understanding, where this anxiety is coming from, despite having a secure job and the house with the white picket fence, and still not understanding, like, why the hell do I feel like I'm caught in this rat race? And we've all been there, but I feel like Bitcoin has taken that away from me. And it's like, what's the value of that?
Yeah, man. Excellently said. And I couldn't agree more. I went through the fiat rat maze, and even having some success, quote unquote success. Right. I was not feeling better about life. I was feeling worse. I was like deeper in the darkness, less meaning. It was just, I was lost. And yeah, I don't know. I'm exploring that a lot. Like, what is it about fiat world? And I don't, if it's like, we have this embodied lie in the money. It's like the money is not what it represents itself to be. It's supposed to be time or energy. Well, it's not, because it's constantly being debased. Yeah. So does that infect us? Like, we're using a bad tool, so it makes us bad? I'm not sure, but something about moving away from that and just denominating your life in Bitcoin and following the rabbit holes that it leads you down, philosophically, intellectually, it enriches your life so much.
Absolutely. I think there's so much mystery in the fiat world of, like, how things work. And there's just certain sleaziness, and you just don't feel good about the methods that are used in a lot of ways. And it's like, you start to kind of like think that that's the way, and like, well, it must be normal. So I guess like, I don't supposed to lie and cheat and steal. Like, this guy's doing it, and this guy's doing it, and this is all my bosses are doing. Like, might as well. Like, all right, well, I almost feel like the Bitcoin network is like this Bitcoin realm. It's this Bitcoin world that you pass into eventually. And it's like, these guys are doing their stuff. Like, the fiat people are doing this fiat stuff, and the Bitcoin people are doing this whole Bitcoin thing. And maybe this isn't fully developed yet, but it's getting there. And it's like, it's a lot brighter, and it's clearer, and it's not fuzzy. And it's this, it's a clearer communication across all aspects. I feel like, I don't know. Yeah, no, I agree. It's clarifying just in general in so many ways, but we sound crazy, almost outsiders. You have to like live through it. Yeah. But it's reassuring to me to see it happening in the lives of others. Like, it's not just me going through this personal transformation because I'm interacting with magic internet money. Like, there's other people experiencing this thing too. So, it's a real rabbit hole. And I don't think anyone knows. We're calling it money. We're calling it technology. You could even call it a social institution in some ways, but none of the terms we have quite capture it, which also lends me to believe it's something so big. Like, we don't have the language for it, really. Yeah, absolutely. And geez, I think Saylor, kind of distilled it beautifully. And I know you had many hours with him that has enlightened me, but like, it's energy. Like, everything is energy. Jiu-jitsu is the mastering of energy, and those who control the energy and those who can retain the energy are going to be better off because of it. And I think that we're seeing that with Bitcoin, and there is this direct correlation to that ability to retain it, that ability to protect it, that ability to preserve it. And we haven't had anything like that Like
Right.
you don't have to give your energy to some other person who's going to, you know, squeeze you of it while they're using it. And you don't have access to it. It's not really yours. And this is the first time that we're able to do that separate from the state. And again, it's absolutely mind blowing. First of all, that we never had this before, but that it's actually been created and executed on quite a beautiful level and on a deep level.
And just in time, it seems like.
Yeah, right.
Like,
well, exactly. It's like this. Someone knew what was going on, you know.
Like if Bitcoin were not a thing, really, if it were not at least where it is today, because if it were just launched, it would, you know, we wouldn't know about it. But the fact that it's reaching, I guess you'd call it adolescence right now, when the world seems to need it a lot. Like the world needs a light to move towards, because it's a lot of dark shit going on out there.
Totally.
And it's what you said, it's like it's inspired you to do all these things, is to go down these rabbit holes, like to work, frankly. Like that's a big thing I've noticed is in fiat world, like I had to force myself to work. Like the sleaziness you described, I felt the sleaziness. You know, there's all these like political games being played. You have to navigate this messy kind of arena. And it's just like, oh, I have to force myself to do it, because what else do you do in the world? I don't know.
Yeah.
But in Bitcoin, it's the exact opposite. It's like you're inspired to work. Like I wake up just alive and electric every day to get into this.
Absolutely. Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? That's the thing. It's like, we are talking about it like it's this unusual thing, but like that's what we're supposed to be doing. And there's no better feeling when you're like, you know what, my money is secure and my money is mine, and I've worked hard for that, and it feels good, and there's accountability and there's understanding, you know, and then I can now focus on the things that I love, the things that I'm passionate about, and try to make that pot a little bit bigger. And it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah. And, you know, like to put a button on it with what you said, it's all energy, right? Everything. And this is we're not like, you know, spiritual babble here. E equals MC squared. Mass is frozen energy. Everything in the universe is energy. It's energy on a tapestry of space and time. It's ridiculous that humans did not have a place to store their energy that other humans could not fuck with up until this point. Right. So like it's that old phrase of power to the people. It's like Bitcoin's literally giving power to the people. So you can actually hold your life's work and energy in something that no one else can mess with. And I love this question, by the way. What is money? Right? This is the name of the show. And this is I think the key to incepting these ideas into people, or at least getting people to question their socioeconomic reality such that they can peel back the layers of this onion and see through some of these euphemisms. And I would say even the dollar itself, you don't want dollars per se. You don't want a definite amount of dollars. You want purchasing power.
But I don't realize it. You're right.
Yes.
But I don't realize it.
That's right. You've been pursuing dollars your whole life. What you're actually pursuing is what those dollars can get you. That's what money is, right? Money is the most exchangeable good. You can think of it as a call option on anything the market can produce. So any good, any service, any knowledge, human time, anything people can do, any service anyone can render for you, money is a call option on that. And that's why it's the most valuable or apex good in a marketplace. So when we look at money, the 5 properties that market actors voluntarily favor, you could also think of as the 5 services we seek from money, are divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability, scarcity. So I'll walk through each one of these. Money needs to be divisible. Pretty obvious. You want to transact at different scales. You want to buy coffee in the same day that you go and buy a house, right? So you'd like to be able to give someone a coin or send someone a wire for $10 million to buy a house. Pretty obvious. Money needs to be durable in that it's not going to corrode over time. If you put a bunch of gold in a safe, it's not going to decompose, right? The half-life on gold is way longer than matters to any of us. If you put a bunch of oranges in the safe and you were using that as money, that's going to rot pretty quickly. So clearly durability matters. Money needs to be recognizable,
which means that each trading party can verify its authenticity. So at every transaction, and I'm handing you dollars, you can certify either with that little pin they mark on dollars to make sure it's a legitimate, U.S. Federal Reserve issued dollar, or if it was gold back in the day, they had different techniques for assaying the gold's authenticity, making sure it wasn't lead plated with gold. In fact, the name sound money, which you've probably heard in your explorations of the rabbit hole, that referred to the sound a gold coin made when dropped a certain way. So you could verify its authenticity by the sound it would create. And this is another reason we introduced coinage and currency, because to verify money at every transaction is a very significant transaction cost. Transaction costs are dissipative to trade, right? If we want to increase trade and increase wealth, we want to reduce transaction costs. So by abstracting into currency or putting it in a warehouse and trusting the warehouse custodian, we can now trade much more quickly and more efficiently. So that's one aspect of money that coinage and currency helped, was recognizability. Money also needs to be portable. Pretty obvious. You want to be able to move it across space, right? If I'm buying something in another city, I need to get my gold or dollars to the other city to give it to the recipient. Finally, and most importantly, money has to be scarce. And now we typically think scarce is purely a supply side function. That's not what scarcity means. Scarcity occurs when demand outstrips supply. So when there is more appetite for the thing than there is a supply of the thing. Okay, so oxygen, pretty important for human life. There's no price on it. Why?
Not scarce.
It's not scarce. The supply way outstrips the demand, right? Something like diamonds, not that important to human existence, yet has a huge price because the demand way outstrips the supply. The unique thing about scarcity and money is that money is always scarce because it's a call option on everything, all the capital, all the savings humans can produce. The heart of man is never satisfied. We always want more. Therefore, money is always scarce by definition. So what market actors tend to favor is the money that has the most inelastic supply. So this means the supply that is least subject to change by the willpower of others. That is what market actors will zero in on. And here, there's a number of ways to think about this. Time, energy, second law of thermodynamics. We cannot create nor destroy energy, right? We're sacrificing time and energy to earn money. You would naturally want the thing you're sacrificing this absolutely scarce time and energy for to be similarly absolutely scarce. That would be the ideal money, right? Something that can't be created or destroyed. With money, to gloss over a little bit of history, monetary metals, best satisfied, divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability. Those are just, and we've tried a lot of experiments. We've had seashells, we've had glass beads, we've had cattle, we've used all kinds of things as money, right? Natural market processes determined that monetary metals were the most satisfactory across the first four properties or services that money can render to us. Of the monetary metals, gold was the most scarce, meaning specifically its supply was the least vulnerable to change. No matter how much effort, time, energy we poured into producing gold, its supply increased the slowest and the most predictably. So this gave us a medium into which we could store economic value, and we would know with relative certainty that it would only change by about 2% year over year. So this gave gold the store value function we traditionally associate with it. That's great, right? Gold is great. Gold is good money. It's been good money, 5,000 years, served a lot of purposes. But the big hang up with gold is lack of portability, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier. You want to be able to move it across space, obviously. But gold's heavy. It's physical, right? It's very expensive to secure. It actually, in one way it's beneficial, and that you can store a lot of economic value in a small area and sort of amortize the security costs around it. But when you need to move it, that's when there's a lot of risk involved. And this was the impetus for introducing, what you alluded to earlier, were the warehousing businesses. So a private enterprise, a free market function came to be where a warehouse would take custody of the gold, give you the warehouse receipt, you can go and transact it. It's as good as gold, right? You have a call option on gold effectively. This was introduced to augment the portability of gold. Well, those warehouses became banks. Those banks became central banks. And this is all, again, I'm not laying out a nefarious scheme here. This is the economics, the economies of scale associated with gold. It is more efficient to centralize custody of this heavy, bulky metal and issue abstractions in it. It's more efficient to transact in that model than it is with physical gold. So that's what drives this process. The problem is you now have to trust the custodian. You've introduced what we call counterparty risk. There's a counterparty to that trade. I can trade this paper with everyone and it's as good as gold until I go to redeem the gold from the warehouse and the gold's not there, or they won't redeem it, or a fraction of what this paper represents is available.
You know, when you get if you're salaried and you get paid, there's sort of an implication there that what you got paid for the work that you did. You know, it's very, there's sort of one-to-one, there's a feeling there's some kind of one-to-one correspondence. I mean, originally it was, you know, if you dug ditches, it really was the work that you did. Then it became a little more abstract that if you're a manager, well, you're doing a different kind of work. But still, there was this image, this idea that, you know, in many of our minds, actually, that it's tied to, you know, work, production, and so forth. But then, of course, it's gone way big. It gets much beyond that, where now money, even before, as I say, Bitcoin, it starts to become quite abstract in terms of once you have ideas of investment. For example, Warren Buffett's one of the richest men in the world, but in terms of the old ideas about work, you know, he's never done a day's work in his life. I mean, in that sense. So the Marxist view of money as labor kind of thing, which is very 19th century, and not recognizing the role of investment as work and as part of the lubrication of a capitalist economy. And now we've gone one step beyond that, it seems to me, that it's now not tied to any of those things. It's sort of itself. And indeed, it is information because it's stored in some digital form. I mean, that's what it is. It's not, you know, and yet it obviously is still related because presumably if you have cryptocurrency, there's an exchange rate, I mean, whatever it is, that seems to fluctuate enormously, that relates it back to what many of us think of as a dollar bill kind of thing. So I'm still struggling. Frankly, I'm still struggling with that, is to try to see what it is and what its implications are. And I confess, I do not understand it.
Well, your intuition's spot on that gold was, you know, we often say this dollar, you know, people say, oh, a currency backed by gold. The question really is what's backing the gold? And that was energy, frankly. You know, it was, you know, no matter how you expended your energy in the world, if you couldn't find something more profitable, frankly, you were either employed in something more profitable than gold mining or you were mining gold. Gold was like kind of the backstop to energy expenditure, something like that. But that energy expenditure is exactly what secured its supply. That's what made it a good store of value. But when you then decouple that and you just give the authority to issue money to a government with no energy expenditure, you get, well, clearly it's a very perverse incentive because now there's one group of people that can just confiscate the energy of others by printing money effectively. And that's what's happening right now. You know, it's It's rampant. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, iCoin Technology. iCoin has just released a sleek new hardware wallet. Looks like a mini iPhone, a little touch screen and camera on it. The device has no Wi-Fi, no cellular connection, no GPS. It's a strictly physically cold hardware wallet. Like I said, it's got a high-res 3-inch touchscreen. It's got a camera for air gapping the wallet. It's got optional Bluetooth compatibility. And it's really a brand new UI, UX experience for a hardware wallet, making it very accessible, easy to use, not intimidating. And as we always talk about on this show, the only way you can truly own your Bitcoin is by having it in self-custody. So you need a device like iCoin Wallet to truly own your Bitcoin. Go to iCointechnology.com today and use promo code Bitcoin23 for 30% off of this new sleek hardware wallet. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, CrowdHealth. CrowdHealth is a Bitcoin-enabled alternative to legacy health insurance. Now let's face it, legacy health insurance is an absolute scam. Nobody can explain this better than the legendary comedian Chris Rock.
Insurance. You got to have some insurance. You got to. That's an insurance. They shouldn't even call it insurance. They should just call it in case shit. Like, I give a company some money in case shit happens. Now, if shit don't happen, shouldn't I get my money back?
So with CrowdHealth, instead of just paying premiums that you'll never see again, you can hold part of this pool of savings in dollars and in Bitcoin through CrowdHealth. And when you have a health event, you can draw against this pool of communal savings. So go to joincrowdhealth.com/breedlove to learn more or sign up. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Wasabi Wallet. Wasabi lets you use Bitcoin privately while still maintaining full control over your money. Specifically, Wasabi Wallet is an open source, non-custodial wallet with privacy built in by default. By using Wasabi, you're effectively putting the private back in private property. Wasabi Wallet is an easy-to-use privacy wallet that can support any amount of Bitcoin transactions. So go to wasabiwallet.io today to download this state-of-the-art wallet software. You really made a splash in the Bitcoin Twitter universe when you went on a rant about what is money on the floor of Parliament.
Yeah, well, listen, and it was funny because it was around that time I think you were reaching out, and then I realized your show is actually called "What Is Money." I'd watched another show of yours, but basically, the speech said a lot of the same things that you're saying, which is that money is a means of transporting value between people and across space and time. And sometimes, asking a first principles question like that in the House of Commons turns a lot of heads, because so often parliamentary debates are mixed up either in the minutia of a highly technical bill or in a bunch of partisan talking points that are incredibly boring and bake in a whole bunch of faulty assumptions from the beginning. And if someone stands up and says, "What is money?" everyone says, "Oh, wait a sec here, I hadn't thought of that." And I think half of Parliament wouldn't have been able to answer the question, even though they walk around with it in their pockets every day.
Well, I think it's a great deed for you to be asking that question in that space. I think it is one of the most underappreciated questions in the world. I think it's very important that we ask these foundational questions specifically in our forums of leadership, because how can we lead if we don't understand the foundations of things? So thank you for that. Thank you for taking that discussion.
I think you're right about that. And in politics, the most frustrating part, Robert, is that when politicians spend money, they often have no consideration for where it comes from.
Mm-hmm.
I was in a parliamentary committee a while back, and the government was proposing another $7 billion expenditure, and I simply said, "Where's the money coming from?" There were about 9 senior public servants in our finance department who sat there dead silent for about 5 minutes. and not a single one of them could explain where they were getting the money to fund the program. And because they have all kinds of technical explanations about how the tax system was going to deliver the money, and how what department was going to engineer it, and which public servants would be involved in spending it, and who would be receiving it. But none of them had even stopped for a second to consider that the money had come from somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And my poor little daughter is crying up there right now because she's paying the debt that the government is amassing with all of this spending. But they literally, Robert, it's amazing. They literally don't even consider where money comes from. They act as though it is just theirs. And how can you perform a cost-benefit analysis if you don't actually consider who pays the cost?
Right.
And of course, most recently, people have been paying it not just through their taxes, but through their inflation.
Okay, so given that definition of money, and clearly I agree with you that it's a foundational technology to civilization. Like, we can't scale human cooperation without it. It's very important. But to your point, politicians discussing how to spend money, you said they're not doing cost benefit calculation. Maybe they are actually, because the cost is effectively zero
to them.
Exactly. Which leads to misallocation of capital, frivolous spending, et cetera. So what, in your view, is the proper role of government in the sphere of money?
Well, I will answer that question directly. I just wanted to quote quickly one of my favorite economists, Thomas Sowell, who said, the first rule of economics is scarcity. There's always more demand than there is supply. People always want more than what there is to offer. And the first rule of politics is to ignore the first rule of economics. Now, why is it that politicians can ignore the scarcity that is imposed on every single creature on Earth? Every creature on Earth lives with scarcity, whether it's a tiny microbe, whether it is a plant that is competing for soil and sun and carbon dioxide, whether it is a creature in the forest fighting for food. Every single creature on the earth, except the politician, must live with scarcity. Why? Because the politician has the ability to pass on that scarcity to someone else. And so he believes that he has an infinite supply of resources to expend. And even if he expends them badly, it is of no cost to him. And that's how we end up with this problem. And so you mentioned, what is the government's role in the issue of money? Well, this is something I had to stumble on after years of frustration watching governments overspend. See, I always said to myself, well, overspending will be unpopular because politicians will end up passing it on in higher taxes, and no one likes taxes. But what I found was that they, instead of raising taxes, which would be bad, they did something, they raised them indirectly by creating cash and imposing an inflation tax. And what is surreptitious about an inflation tax is that nobody realizes why they're paying the higher cost. So as more dollars flood the economy and raise the price of consumer goods, people blame their grocer for the higher food prices, the realtor for the higher house prices, the gas station for the higher gas prices, not knowing that it's actually the politician that has inflated the cost of all of those things. And so what I think politicians, and we need to depoliticize the central banks, and they need to have a single purpose, which is to protect the value of our money by fighting inflation. And in my view is that the lower the inflation, the better. I don't believe that provoking inflation stimulates economic growth. To the contrary, I think it actually shrinks the economy, the real economy of goods and services, by screwing up price signals and by punishing good economic behavior. And so the role of central banks in money, I believe, should be singularly to protect its value and keep inflation low.
Monetary system has to respect the laws of nature. If you want to engineer a good network, what are the things that you have to protect it against? You have to make sure that monetary system can measure value effectively. You have to make sure that it can transfer value effectively. You have to make sure that it can store value effectively. But most importantly, and this is something that I think a lot of people miss, is most importantly, you have to make sure that you actually retain users. Mm-hmm. Because Metcalfe's law works both ways. As the value of a network increases exponentially when users join the network linearly, if you begin to disenfranchise users and piss them off or do other means, then as those users exit, the value of the network decreases exponentially.
Yeah.
So the most important thing you can do as an architect of a monetary system is protect it from sinking. Understand that you are dealing with a network that obeys the law of Metcalfe's law. And the worst thing you can do is disenfranchise users and motivate them to exit and use a different network. Remember, money can be anything. It doesn't need to be gold. It doesn't need to be, it's a shape-shifting thing. It's not bound by the constraints of mass. If it just so happened that gold emerged as the common monetary network or the foundation of the modern monetary network because it's good at measuring value, because it's effective at transferring value, because it's good at storing value, all the things that you mentioned earlier and that you're way better than me at explaining, but also because one thing that you miss is because its control authority is fair and preserved through the brutality, the brutal meritocracy that is nature and power projection, meaning, it's no secret that the most powerful militaries end up being the ones with the most gold, right? And if anyone becomes oppressive with their control authority over money, then users of that monetary system have the freedom to countervail the control authority and take it. Okay, so if you're an engineer and you want to prevent a monetary system from having severe loss of users or having any of these loss events where it can't measure or transfer or store value, then as an architect, you need to take responsibility of what you can control and prevent that system from arriving at a state where it could lead to that loss event. What does that mean? You don't want you want to make sure that you don't do anything that would piss people off. For example, that you start surveilling them through their monetary system, or that you start, denial of service attacking them through sanctions. Like obviously they're going to exit the network if you keep on doing that. You don't want to debase it because now you can't measure value effectively, right? But there are tensions there. So the point here is it's the architect's responsibility or the engineer's responsibility to act, to do what's within their control to prevent a loss event, which means to prevent the monetary system from achieving a hazardous state. And so if the architects who have that control choose to then surveil or debase or do all these other things, then that's your fault for that's the root of the problem, right?
Yeah.
After you read history and if you see what's happening, you will start thinking like, why do I hold fiat money?
Right.
So it is what, the kind of show that you made, the What is Money show, like the question of money. This is the kind of education that everyone gets to have, only just American, but everyone in the world, including Indonesia, needs to know this question, what is money?
Yeah, and I would throw in here that even Ray Dalio, right, a guy that's like the most successful hedge fund manager in history, understands history at a very deep level, as is plain to see in his writing, his books, and his talking, understands the value of gold even. only recently did he start to understand the value of Bitcoin. Like it took this guy that presumably in the world is one of the most knowledgeable people on markets, money, history, all these things. He only just now started to see it. So like, this isn't some educational campaign that like a few people have this education and a lot of people don't. It's like 99.99% of humans have no idea what money is, in my estimation. If Ray Dalio doesn't know what money is, I'm going to say that disqualifies like 99.99% of everyone else. So this is it's like as a species, we have discounted how important money is. And we've tried to manage it and play these games and create fiat and, all these games we talked about, all this economic colonialism and slavery and all, like we keep trying to game the system, but it just blows up in our face every single time.
We covered the Jeffersonian era. We covered the Lincoln era. We covered, Jefferson versus Hamilton, of course. Jackson's fight with the central bank and Nicholas Biddle. We cover panics, 1819 panic, etc. I even went back and covered the beginning of central banking, which starts in France with a dude by the name of John Law. So that's how the book starts. Actually, the book starts before that. The book starts off with, would you rather be a trader or a king, a merchant or a king? And I was just showing how some of the most famous crowns of Europe were actually financed by merchants and, war supplies, et cetera, because the kings really didn't have any wealth. And they were financially illiterate. So they always had like money men around. So I was trying to show how like there's always a money man around. Okay. Like in a kingdom, when it was a monarchy, the money man was running the show. When you move to like a republic style government, there's a money man around calling the shots. Okay. And financing everything and manipulating you into wars and pitting you against both sides and financing both sides. Like I talked about before, how Wall Street financed both sides of the war. You had, the isooctane technology that was operating over in Germany under Adolf Hitler, but the chemical corporations like IG Farben, et cetera, and GE, et cetera, ITT were holding back patents and technologies from America and giving them to the Germans, right? But at the same time, they're operating out of America. And then like America would come down on them and say, hey, you guys stop doing this deal. So they'll set up a shell corporation and then run a deal through a shell corporation. So they're just like playing us the whole entire time. So I figure if I show people, how you keep getting played by money men, you might understand that you should probably buy Bitcoin. See what I did there?
Yeah, no, that's honestly probably everything I'm trying to teach in a nutshell. In a way, it's like we have all these fictions about reality, like this company or that country or whatever, but it's always about the money, right? Or you could say property in general, to be more general, but money is the most important form of property.
Right.
And, I think money, it's basically been the means and ends of all war, really, right? Like clearly it costs money to fund war. You only go to war if you think you can get more money conquering the guy than you're going to spend conquering the guy. Otherwise you wouldn't do it.
Right.
So it's a business driven decision.
Correct.
And then statism or government in general, it's just a business, right? They have a bottom line. They have revenues. Revenues are taxation and inflation. It's a business built on the profitability of coercion and violence. But it feels like if people could just see it that way, it's like every human organization is a business.
Yeah.
There's no government that has some higher moral aim or your best interest in mind. Like they are just individuals serving their own interest in a business. And you are the crop, actually. If you're the taxpayer, you're the crop for that business model.
So gold has shortcomings of, divisibility, auditability, and then especially salability across space. And then fiat, of course, has shortcomings of its, stability across time, shortcomings of its auditability. Yeah. And just various shortcomings. And so the fact that we could have this situation, just this messy, opaque global market of kind of fractional reserve banking is just an inherent limitation of our money. That we don't have a money that checks off every single box of what we want money to do. Each type of money just has, enough of the boxes checked that it's workable as money, but it's not perfect as money.
Yeah.
Like the perfect form of money would be like if you could just mentally teleport gold to each other and, and never forget your password. Or let's say you have
Yes.
Bitcoin and you just say you had your private key, you can never forget it. And you just have no limitations with it. And of course, we can never have perfect money, but you can have you can get closer and closer to the platonic ideal of what money is with better technology. And so you can, to the extent that Bitcoin continues to be successful, it's closer to the ideal money than gold was, assuming it can be, it can hit some sort of critical mass in terms of liquidity and unstoppability.
Right.
It gets out of its nation stage
Right.
and into its, basically if it can avoid being killed in the womb.
Yeah. Well, that's such a great point. Almost like the perfect money would have the most frictions to involuntary exchange, whether it's inflation, confiscation, taxation, but minimal frictions to voluntary exchange. So if your country starts inflating your currency and you want to get out of there, or they start being oppressive in whatever way, financially repressive in whatever way, you could just port that money out somewhere else. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Bitcoin Conference 2023. This 3-day event will be held May 18th through 20th in Miami Beach. This is going to be the biggest event of the year, as it always is. And the past 2 years in Miami have simply been amazing. Day 1's Industry Day. Days 2 and 3 are going to be open to general admission. And I'd say this is a great place to go and network with Bitcoiners or even look for a job. Just a really all-around great experience. There's a fantastic speaker lineup, including Michael Saylor, Zoltan Pozar, Lynn Alden, Alex Gladstein, many others. And last year, we did a 10 million sats giveaway for this event, and we're going to do it again this year. So to get discounted tickets and enter for a chance to win 10 million sats, go to b.tc/conference and use code Breedlove. Now I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, Casa. Casa makes it simple to buy and secure your Bitcoin without wondering whether you're doing it right. Specifically, Casa provides a multi-key custody solution, which is by far the most secure way to custody your Bitcoin. Now, when I talk about Bitcoin being theft-proof money or inviolable private property, a multi-key custody model is exactly what I am talking about. Using multiple keys lets you maintain full control of your Bitcoin while also giving you redundancy in case you lose one of the keys. It's also the best way to secure your Bitcoin for inheritance planning purposes. So go to keys.casa, that's C-A-S-A, today to sign up and use discount code Breedlove.
Money doesn't just communicate about us. It serves a secondary function, is that how we spend money communicates value to the entire economy. So between buyer and seller, what's the price of this thing? What is its value? And that answer is constantly being sent and received, digested, acted upon. It changes slightly. And so does the economy constantly, but also incrementally, gradually develop with each new signal. It's amazingly complex power at work here. And yet there's this constant never-ending evolution and development. And ultimately it's the how, why, and what of what needs producing, where, and when. That's the message that's being communicated. So money in itself then is like a language.
Yes.
And if you look at the history of fiat money, let's say that fiat money started in, it didn't, but let's just say for the sake of argument, it started in 1914 when the British, French and Germans abandoned the gold standard to print the money to pay for World War I. Or we could say that it started in 1971, whenever, it doesn't matter. Nobody is in charge of fiat money. Central banker is to an extent, but he can't control all the technological, all the fintech that's going on, and all the evolutions. And I don't believe our fiat system it was ever planned. It's just constantly evolved.
Yes.
With billions of people contributing in their own different ways, simply by using it. Yeah. And buying it and selling it, and what you do with our money. And it's the actions of I don't believe the architects of fiat money even realize that when a bank creates money, when a bank issues debt, money gets created.
Right.
I don't think they realize that, but they just adopted fiat money just to get out of a tight fiscal spot. Extenuating circumstances at the time. There's a war to fight, and it's constantly evolved ever since. With you and I have each evolved it just by buying and sending stuff. But somebody who's developed some clever little widget whereby you can just tap and go with your credit card or whatever it is. These are all ways that have evolved the fiat money system. But it wasn't planned. There was a decision taken, and various decisions have been taken, but it was still, the development was still in many ways organic, but it was an organic development from unsound foundations. Let's put it like that. And similarly, nobody planned the language that we speak today. It's very hard to plan and regulate a language, and it's many have tried over the years to regulate the language they speak, and they still do today. If you use the wrong words, you can get cancelled very easily. And but even so, language is very hard to plan and regulate, and you might be banned from using certain words, but you can bet your bottom dollar that people are using those words. In private. When they're in private. Exactly. Yeah. So anyway, language has constantly evolved and developed according to the use and the needs of billions of people. And again, just by you and I having this conversation now, we are evolving the language in a minuscule way, in the same way that if you and I were sending each other money, we'd be evolving the economy in a way. Now, the English that we speak today, it's unrecognizable from the English of Chaucer, pretty unrecognizable from Shakespeare. It's not that similar to the language of Dickens. There are probably fewer words, but even though English is smaller than it was and different to what it was, it's now far more widely spoken than it ever was with Chaucer, Dickens, or Shakespeare.
Right.
The network has grown.
Yes.
Now, there's all sorts of reasons why the network has grown. Probably the main reason is the empire, British Empire, all over the world. But then you could say, well, why hasn't Spanish got the same reach? And it's probably because the Spanish Empire was centered around South America and Portuguese, whereas English was much more higgledy-piggledy all over the place.
Right.
And even though America wasn't part of the English Empire, the British Empire, you still spoke English. After you kicked us out. Bad decision, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand what is money, right? What is it? Right?
I agree.
If we look back, let's just start at the very beginning. When we as humans developed, we lived in tribes of 100 to 150 people, and whatever in that local area, whatever the scarce commodity was, it could have been salt or stones or shells. And that's what we decided to store our value. And that was our money. That's how we stored our value. But the problem with that is that if one tribe would travel 10 or 20 miles and go try to do commerce or trade with another tribe, and one was using stones and another one was using salt, there's too much friction in that. And so we as humans defaulted, and we decided collectively 3,500 years ago to use gold and silver as our money. And that's what we've used for thousands of years until 1971. And what happened in 1971 was that Nixon took the U.S. off the gold standard. And so, for 51 years now, our money's been backed by the full faith and credit of the United States government. And so that system is failing. We see cracks in the system. When the government can just go out and print 30 to 40% more U.S. dollars over a 2-year period, which causes prices to go up because the dollar is worthless. I'm not saying worthless, I'm saying worth less, right? Then it causes pain to people. And so that system needs to be fixed. And I'm a firm believer that Bitcoin is one of the solutions to fixing that problem.
Yeah, agreed with that. I've agreed very clearly on the what is money question. I think it is the most important question that people can mine for truth or answers, really, to understand what's going on in the world today. So, and I guess one of the main answers to that question that a lot of people don't understand is that it is a technology, ultimately, right? It's a tool for solving a problem. The problem being the transference of value across space and time. Mm-hmm. What has driven this change? Like as you said, we started out with kind of prehistoric tools for satisfying this function. We got to gold and silver, and now we've gone away from that since 1971.
So the transition, like I said, we're gold and silver. Then in the 11th century, the Chinese invented paper money. So 1,000 years ago, that was the new technology. This paper money, it's lightweight, it's more portable, it's more divisible than this heavy bag of gold, right? And so, that was new technology 1,000 years ago. And then, and then it's, 560 years ago, the Medici family started using what's called double entry bookkeeping, which created the ledger, right? That's the ledger technology. And so ledger technology we've been using for 500 years now. And that's what created the banks. Yeah. Banks are ledgers. They're just big ledgers. Yeah. And that's what created the bond market. Right. And so all Bitcoin is the same ledger technology that we've been using for 500 years with a little added twist to it. And the added twist is that it's distributed and it's updated every 10 minutes. So it's distributed around the world to 10,000 nodes and it's updated every 10 minutes. So it's a decentralized ledger that uses the power of the internet. And so we're not inventing anything new. It's just the same ledger. So I basically call this like triple entry bookkeeping. Instead of double entry, which is basic ledger, it's triple entry because it's being updated every 10 minutes and blasted around the world. So we're all using one universal ledger. And so that's the new technology. It's not, it's not anything like super special where we're inventing like fire, but it is, a very important milestone for humankind because it's going to allow us to, get off, fiat money that's not backed by anything. And we go to a hard money standard like we have been on for 3,500 years.
Right. Yeah, that's a real important realization too, I think, when you're mining this question, is that hard money is the norm. The past 100 some odd years is the anomaly, really. Whereas we just, due to recency bias, I guess, we think this is the norm.
Right.
And it's just not the case. And so the double entry and is debits, credits. The third entry is basically the timestamp, right?
Exactly.
Universal.
And the distributed nature of it.
Yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
And the importance of that is single source of truth, effectively, right?
Right. You have one universal ledger. You don't if you have a JP Morgan account and I have a Bank of America account, if I move money or, if I send you money, your JP Morgan, my Bank of America, I have to reconcile. They have to get together and balance the books, right? With Bitcoin, it's one universal ledger. There's no balancing. There's no reconciliation that's needed. It's just I'm transferring, value to you.
Yes.
It just happens instantly. So there's one, like you said, one universal form of truth.
Yeah. So simple, yet implications so profound. And the idea of something just automatically auditing itself, reconciling itself. Maybe it's not fire. Don't tell Michael Saylor that, though. But it's a simple yet tremendous innovation, right, for scaling human cooperation.
Right.
Basically.
It's very disruptive too.
Yeah.
I mean, if you think about it, we've been using banks for 500 years. We've been using accountants, and audit firms for hundreds of years, right? I mean, their jobs are in jeopardy if this, grows to be, at scale.
Yeah.
So it's going to be very disruptive.
One thing that really jumps out to me here is there seems to be this deep connection between the corruptibility of money itself, right? The fact that it can be debased, centrally planned, etc., and warfare, right? Like and that was the excuse for the first. It was the first national bank in the U.S. It's because we're going to war, right? We needed a central bank to fund the war, effectively.
Right.
So when you start to look at humanity through that lens, that we've been engaged in these acts of conflict with one another, but it's always critically tied to the money itself, like the control of the money. That's been kind of the saga we've been dealing with, right? Throughout all human history.
You know, you could certainly argue all wars, but more specifically Napoleonic wars onwards.
Yes.
And that includes all the proxy wars. That includes all the regime change wars in Nicaragua, Venezuela, blah, 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 Syria, now, basically everywhere to protect the quote unquote petrodollar. But it's the pathway that man becomes corrupt is certainly money.
Right.
And there are certainly just wars where I'm invading you, trying to take your women, children, and wheat, right? It is just for you to rebel and fight back. That I have absolutely no problem with, because it's one-on-one conflict versus conflict, not the folks that are wielding the power of the money are never the ones actually going to war. And they convince millions to die, millions to starve. There's genocide at every turn. Under the guise of protecting their interests.
Right.
World War I and World War II were forcibly started on us. It had almost nothing to do with Germany, specifically World War I, and then Hitler's rise to power was sponsored by them and funded by them, even funded by the United States in part.
And he's born out of the ashes of the Weimar hyperinflation, which I think is always a key point. Like, if fiat currency did not exist, Hitler would not have risen to power.
Right. And why did the Weimar Republic even suffer so much, right? They were pulverized on purpose by the money changers, right? They hyperinflated due to their massive debts that they owed in reparations after World War I. What happened after World War II? Did the U.S. ever get paid back? No. So all of this stuff was forced on the German people. And then it's a natural human response to stress and pressure. It's very similar to what the COVID hysteria, right? Or Trump derangement syndrome, all the stuff that's forced on us. You're only going to react in a few ways, and you want to find a common enemy. And that sort of, social engineering is not new, right? They're really good at it now, i.e. look at all the COVID responses. They were less good at it back in the Weimar Republic. But that gave rise to the German people accepting essentially the birth of the Nazi Party and Hitler and signing up for it, even though they didn't realize what they were signing up for. They just want to change.